He buried the secret for 37 years, until his own son called the police. It was the last good summer in the Voss house. That is how Marcus Voss would later describe it, speaking to investigators in a conference room in Garland County, Arkansas, in the spring of 2023. The last summer before he was old enough to understand what he was seeing. The summer of 1986, when he was 7 years old, and his father, Raymond Voss, had come home from a job site one August evening with mud on his boots, and had stood at the kitchen sink for a long time washing his hands in a way that Marcus, even at 7, recognized as different from the way a man washes off ordinary dirt. Marcus did not know what that difference meant. He did not ask. He ate his supper, watched television, and went to bed, and the summer went on the way summers do, and he grew up, and the memory of those hands at the sink stayed somewhere in him, not quite a thought, not quite a question, for 37 years. Then one evening in January 2023, Marcus Voss opened a news alert on his phone, read a single paragraph, and sat very still at his kitchen table for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called the Garland County Sheriff's Office. But to understand what Marcus Voss found in that news alert, and what it meant, and what it cost him, you have to go back to that August, and to the woman who never came home from it. Hot Springs, Arkansas, in the summer of 1986, was the kind of place that operated at two speeds: the tourist pace of Bathhouse Row and the lakefront, and the quieter pace of the neighborhoods behind it, where actual people lived and raised children and knew which houses had the good Halloween candy and which neighbors could be counted on in an emergency. Garland County had a population of just under 70,000, and Hot Springs was its center, a city of contradictions, a resort town built on natural thermal springs that had attracted everyone from Al Capone to Babe Ruth in its heyday, and which by 1986 had settled into a steady middle-class life of lakeside subdivisions, church potlucks, and Friday night football. The Ouachita National Forest pressed in close on the western side of town, and on summer evenings the air smelled of pine and the lake in charcoal, and the sound you heard in the residential streets was screen doors and sprinklers and children on bicycles. Nora Jean Calloway was 31 years old that summer. She had lived in Hot Springs her whole life, in the same neighborhood where her mother still lived, 3 streets over, close enough that Nora could walk to her mother's house in 8 minutes, and did so most Sunday afternoons with her daughter, Lily, who was 4 years old and had inherited Nora's brown eyes and her habit of stopping to examine anything interesting on the sidewalk. Nora worked the breakfast and lunch shift at Lakeview Diner on Central Avenue 4 days a week, and was known there the way good waitresses are known in small cities, by name, by order, by the specific quality of her attention. She remembered things about people. She asked about the wife's hip surgery and the grandson's Little League game and the new job. She had been there 6 years and did not consider it a stopping point. She was taking accounting classes 2 evenings a week at Garland County Community College. Slowly, on the schedule that a single mother with a 4-year-old and a part-time income can manage. She had plans. She had a daughter. She had a mother 3 streets over who expected her on Sundays. On the morning of August 19th, 1986, Nora Calloway dropped Lily at her mother's house at 7:30, drove to Lakeview Diner for the breakfast shift, and never came back. The breakfast shift at Lakeview ended at 2 in the afternoon. Nora was logged off the register at 2:04, confirmed by the manager, Dottie Reese, who initialed the timesheet herself and watched Nora pick up her purse and walk out the back door to the employee lot. At 2:15, Nora's car, a white 1982 Chevette with a cracked left taillight, was still in the lot. At 2:45, it was still there. Dottie Reese stepped outside to smoke at 3:10 and noticed it hadn't moved. She walked to it. The doors were locked. The purse was not inside. The keys were not in it. There was nothing to indicate that anything was wrong, except that Nora Calloway's car was sitting in a parking lot with its owner nowhere near it, and it was after 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon in August, and nobody knew where she was. Dottie called Nora's mother. Her mother drove to the diner. By 4:30, they were at the Garland County Sheriff's Office. A deputy filed the initial report at 4:52 p.m. On August 19, 1986, the notation in the case file reads, female, W, 31, last seen approximately 14:05 8 departing place of employment. No signs of disturbance. Vehicle on scene. By 8 that evening, the search for Nora Calloway had already stalled. 2 days later, a discovery was made at a construction staging area off Highway 7, near the tree line of the National Forest, half a mile from the job site where Raymond Voss had been working that week. The investigators who arrived noted that the ground near the tree line showed signs of recent disturbance. The area had been excavated by a contractor. Fresh soil had been moved. The discovery was not announced publicly for 11 days. The case file was reclassified, and Raymond Voss, when deputies came to his house to ask where he had been on the afternoon of August 19th, told them he'd been at the job site until 5 and then gone home. His foreman confirmed it. There were 3 other men on that site who said the same thing. The investigation had nowhere to go. The diner staff had been interviewed in the first 48 hours. The Highway 7 staging area had been processed. A canvass of the surrounding blocks had turned up no witnesses, no one who remembered seeing Nora Calloway after 2 in the afternoon. The car sat in the diner lot for 3 days before the department authorized its release to Estelle Calloway, who drove it home and parked it in her carport, and could not bring herself to drive it. It sat there through the fall, through the winter, through the following spring. A neighbor once gently asked her about it. Estelle told him it was staying. The investigation had reached its first dead end. It would not be the last. The lead detective on the Calloway case was a man named Walt Sheridan, 44 years old, 12 years with the Garland County Sheriff's Department, and the kind of investigator who could not let go of a case that didn't close cleanly. He had known Nora Calloway, not personally, but the way people in a mid-sized city know the waitress at the diner they've eaten at for years. He had been to Lakeview Diner with his wife on weekday mornings. He knew which table Nora would seat them at without asking. That was not, strictly speaking, a professional consideration. But it was a human one, and Walt Sheridan was a man who did not cleanly separate those two things. The investigation in the fall of 1986 focused on 2 people, a man named Gerald Stout, an ex-boyfriend who had been seen arguing with Nora in the diner parking lot 3 weeks before she disappeared, and Raymond Voss, who had the job site. The proximity, and after deeper background checks, a prior incident in Louisiana in 1979 involving a restraining order that had been dropped before it reached court. Gerald Stout had an airtight alibi. He had been at his sister's wedding in Little Rock, photographed at the ceremony and the reception from noon until past midnight. He was eliminated. Raymond Voss had the confirmed timeline from his foreman and 3 co-workers. He had no documented connection to Nora Calloway. He was a family man, a wife, a 7-year-old son, a modest house on the east side of town. He had lived in Hot Springs for 4 years. He attended the Methodist Church on Oak Street. Walt Sheridan looked at Raymond Voss and felt the thing detectives feel when they believe someone is in front of them and cannot prove it. He put Voss's name on a card. He wrote 4 words beneath it, confirmed site. Prior order. He kept that card for 30 years. What records later showed, and what was not acted on in 1986, though it was documented, was that the construction staging area off Highway 7 had been used exclusively by Voss's employer during that month. and that Voss had been the last employee to sign out on August 19th. The site foreman, in a second interview 6 weeks after the first, acknowledged that he hadn't actually watched Voss leave. He had assumed the 5 o'clock sign out based on habit. That discrepancy went into the file. It produced no further action. The department had no physical evidence and no witness. The case stayed open on paper and went cold in practice. Meanwhile, Nora Calloway's mother, a woman named Estelle Calloway, was raising Lily, 4 years old when her mother disappeared. 5 by Christmas, starting school the following fall, carrying a lunchbox that Estelle had packed, walking into a building full of children who had mothers to wave them off. Estelle waved. She never stopped waving. And she never stopped calling Walt Sheridan on the anniversary of August 19th, and he never stopped picking up. By 1993, 7 years had passed. Walt Sheridan had moved to a different unit within the department, but had kept the Calloway file in a box that moved with his desk every time he was reassigned. He still had the card with Raymond Voss's name on it. Raymond Voss had left Hot Springs in 1990, quietly, without any public announcement. His wife had told neighbors it was for a job opportunity in Oklahoma. The house went up for sale in April of that year and was bought by a young couple who planted a garden in the backyard and painted the trim yellow. Nobody thought much about the Voss family's departure at the time. People moved. By 1998, 12 years after Nora disappeared, Lily Calloway was 18 and graduating from Hot Springs High School. Estelle Calloway was in the 3rd row with a camera. Lily knew what she knew and carried it the way children carry the things they were too young to be told, as a shape in the background of everything, present but unnamed. She had been accepted to the University of Arkansas. She was going to study social work. She wanted, she told her grandmother, to help families in crisis. Estelle held her hand at the graduation dinner and did not say anything for a long time. The case file for Nora Jean Calloway had been formally designated a cold case by the Garland County Sheriff's Office in 1994. Walt Sheridan retired in 2002. He kept the box. The card with Raymond Voss's name stayed in it. Raymond Voss, by that point, had been living in Muskogee, Oklahoma for 12 years under the same name, working as a site supervisor for a small construction company. His son Marcus was 23. Marcus would later say that growing up, his father had been a man of few words and strong habits, a man who kept his distance in a way that felt like privacy rather than coldness, who coached Little League one year and then stopped without explanation, who drank a beer on the porch every evening and watched the yard in a way that Marcus had never been able to name. He loved his father. He did not fully know his father. Most people don't. Every case on this channel means weeks of research, verifying records, and piecing together lives that deserved more than what they got. If this work matters to you, take a second to like and subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We read every one. Now, let's get back to Nora. Then, in January 2023, the Garland County Sheriff's Office released a statement about advances in forensic technology being applied to the Calloway case as part of a statewide cold case initiative. A local Hot Springs news outlet ran the story, including the original case details, the diner, the date, the staging area near Highway 7, the job site proximity. The story mentioned, for the first time in any public document, that investigators in 1986 had identified a person of interest who had worked at a construction site near the scene. The story did not name Raymond Voss. It did not need to. Marcus Voss was sitting at his kitchen table in Tulsa when the alert came through on his phone at 9:14 in the evening. He read the story once. He read it again. He set the phone down and sat with his hands flat on the table. He thought about the job site his father had been working that August. He thought about the specific date the story mentioned, August 19th, 1986. He thought about a 7-year-old boy watching a man wash his hands at a kitchen sink in a way that had no ordinary name. He thought about the voicemail. In November 2022, 2 months before the news story ran, Raymond Voss had left Marcus a voicemail that Marcus had not known what to do with. He had listened to it 4 times and then sat with it the way you sit with something too heavy to put down and too heavy to keep carrying. In it, Raymond Voss said he had done something a long time ago that he had never been able to undo. He said he was sorry. He said he had thought about telling Marcus for years and had never found the way. He did not name Nora Calloway. He did not need to. 37 years of not quite a thought and 1 November voicemail became, in the space of 15 minutes at a kitchen table in Tulsa, something with a shape and a name. Marcus Voss called the Garland County Sheriff's Office at 8:47 that evening. He told them who he was. He told them who his father was. He told them about August 1986, and about the kitchen sink, and about the voicemail. The investigator on the other end, Sergeant Dana Hollis, assigned to the Calloway cold case 2 years earlier, listened to all of it without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she asked if he would be willing to come in. He said he would be there in the morning. He drove 4 hours through the night without stopping. He did not call ahead to warn anyone. He had already decided what he was going to do. The only question left was how to say it out loud. Sergeant Dana Hollis had inherited the Calloway file the way cold cases are inherited, with a box of aging documents, a card in someone's handwriting with a name on it, and the understanding that a previous investigator had believed in a direction that evidence had never been enough to confirm. She had located Raymond Voss in Muskogee in 2021. He was 68 years old. He had remarried after his first wife's death in 2005. He attended a Baptist church. He had 3 grandchildren. He had never in 37 years come back to Garland County. When Marcus Voss walked into the sheriff's office at 7:30 in the morning and sat down across from Sergeant Hollis, he brought 3 things: a handwritten account of the memory he had carried for 37 years, a photograph from the summer of 1986 showing Raymond Voss at the construction site that his mother had kept in a shoebox, and a phone. On that phone was a voicemail left by Raymond Voss to Marcus in November 2022, 2 months before the news story ran. In it, Raymond Voss said he had something he needed Marcus to know. He said he had done something a long time ago that he had never been able to undo. He said he didn't know how to say it in a way that would make it make sense. He said he was sorry. He did not name Nora Calloway. He did not need to. Hollis listened to the voicemail 3 times. Then she applied for a warrant. The process that followed moved carefully and thoroughly. Forensic genealogy had already confirmed, through biological material from the 1986 evidence, a DNA profile. When a direct sample from Raymond Voss was obtained through a court order in February 2023, the match came back within 2 weeks. Conclusive. Raymond Voss was arrested at his home in Muskogee, Oklahoma, on March 4, 2023. He did not resist. He sat in the chair his wife had been sitting in an hour before and waited while the officers explained the charge. His neighbors in Muskogee, when reporters came to the quiet street that afternoon, said the same things that neighbors always say: that he had been quiet, that he had kept to himself, that they never would have guessed. In Garland County, the news reached Estelle Calloway through her granddaughter Lily, who drove to her grandmother's house and sat with her on the porch and told her. Estelle Calloway was 81 years old. She had been waiting 37 years. She sat very still for a long moment. Then she reached over and took Lily's hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Raymond Voss was extradited to Arkansas and charged with first-degree murder. He entered a guilty plea in October 2023. He was sentenced to life in prison. In the sentencing statement read by the judge, the court noted that justice had taken 37 years. It noted, also, that the call that finally made it possible had come from Raymond Voss's own son. Nora Jean Calloway was 31 years old in the summer of 1986. She worked the breakfast shift, remembered people's names, and dropped her daughter at her mother's house on the way to work every morning she was on the clock. She was taking accounting classes 2 evenings a week. She had plans. She had Lily. She had a mother 3 streets over who expected her on Sundays. Raymond Voss went to church and coached Little League and washed his hands at the kitchen sink on the evening of August 19th and went on to live 37 more years while Estelle Calloway raised his victims. Daughter and Walt Sheridan kept a card in a box and eventually handed that box to someone else, who handed it to Dana Hollis, who received a phone call on a January night from a man who had carried a memory for 37 years and finally understood what it meant. Marcus Voss was 43 years old when he made that call. He has said publicly that it was the hardest thing he has ever done, and the only thing he could have done. Those two things are not contradictions. Lily Calloway was 41 years old when the plea came through. She had spent 25 years working in social services in Garland County, helping families in crisis, the way she had told her grandmother she would. She was in her office when Sergeant Hollis called. She walked outside and stood in the parking lot for a while. Then she drove to her grandmother's house, the one 3 streets from where Nora used to live, and she told Estelle that it was over. What does a family owe the truth? What does a son owe a stranger? What does 37 years of silence cost? Measured not in the years themselves, but in what fills them, in the daughter who grew up, and the grandmother who waited, and the detective who kept a card in a box and refused to consider the matter closed. These are not rhetorical questions. I want to know what you think. Leave your answer in the comments. Justice found Nora Jean Calloway after 37 years, and it came from a direction no one had anticipated. Stories like hers, and like Marcus Voss's, are why this channel exists. If you believe the truth is always worth pursuing, subscribe. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for watching.